Have you ever just felt, just, you wake up and this is not a day I want to live through right now. I don't want to get up. I just want to stay in bed. I don't have anything I'm looking forward to today. I'm just going to sail through it, and my head can't hit that pillow fast enough tonight. Did you ever feel in your relationship with God, and today's the day I go to church? You walk in and people go, "Happy Sabbath," and you go, "Happy Sabbath." We talk about the high points of life and of faith and the amazing things that God does for us in many times over the course of our lives, and these high points can be so exhilarating, and they empower us to move forward. But there are times when we just really aren't feeling it, and in fact, we can slip into a type of spiritual depression, and we might not even be able to identify what it is that's going on with us, but something's not right, and we just kind of coast for a while. We don't talk about that in church, but today we will. Please pray with me. God, be near us. Help us to understand what it means to be a Christian, what it means to follow you, what it means to turn to you, and what you're expecting of us. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. We've been following the story of Elijah. Elijah was a prophet of God, a man of God that was very bold. He goes before the king of the country in those days, a king that had gone so far away from God and was a generational a backslider, had gone after everything that wasn't God, everything he could possibly worship besides God, and he brought the people to do the same. And Elijah goes before this king, and he stands there and he says, "There will be not dew or rain until by my word," and he leaves. So Elijah has faced the king full of this holy zeal, this righteous indignation, this need to go and do what God told him to do, because the word of the Lord came to Elijah and said to do this. He went and did it, and then he went, and then the word of the Lord came to him and said, "Now go by the brook Cherith." And so he gets out of there. He goes by this brook. He chills there for a few years. There's a little stream there when all the rest of the country is lacking water, and birds come, ravens, they come and they give him food every single day, morning and evening. It's nice. It's kind of a resort, getaway. Just gets to unwind, detox from that really stressful experience with the king. And after a while, the brook, the Bible says in 1 Kings that it began to dry up. And then the word of the Lord comes to Elijah and says, "Go to Zarephath, and there's a widow that I prepared to take care of you." And so he gets up and he goes to the widow that's there gathering sticks, like we talked about before. And this widow takes care of him and feeds him every day. And then the widow's son dies. And then Elijah takes the boy and prays for him, and he revives, and he brings him back out. Everything's great. And so it's just, kid came back from the dead. This is exciting. But he gets to have this care put around him. He sees God working, and it's great. Finally, the word of the Lord about 3.5 years later comes to him and says, "Now go show yourself again to Ahab." So Elijah, he gets up, he goes and he finds this king out in the country looking for green grass for the cows and horses. He goes out there and he tells Ahab to bring all the people together, all of Israel together on this mountain, and all the people show up, all of his kinsmen. And Elijah is up there on this mountain, Mount Carmel, and it's Elijah and all these false prophets of this other god, and Ahab and all the people. While he's up there, he says, choose, decide today who you're going to serve, and this is how the test is going to go down. Fire will fall from heaven, from the real God. And the people will say, oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, we'll buy that. And so they wait. The first god doesn't make a peep. Finally, it's Elijah's turn. He kneels down and he prays and he says, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let them know today that you are the Most High God and that you have turned their hearts back to you again, and that I am your servant. And then fire falls from heaven and consumes the sacrifice and the wood and the stones and the water in the trench around the altar, and it licks the dust up from the ground. And all of these people that had been worshiping Baal and Asherah for 100 years fall on their faces and say, the Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. And Elijah is ecstatic. This is what he had been praying for his whole life. While he watched his family, his extended family, his nation go after everything that wasn't God, finally turn to the true God to see God act in such a mighty, miraculous way. And he says, kill the prophets of Baal. And then the Bible says that Elijah killed the prophets, those false prophets, down by the brook. And it's interesting that those prophets, they remain the prophets of Baal even after they see the fire fall. And Elijah, it says, he took them and he killed them. And it's very, very, 300 type thing to do, right? Just rah, and he just kills them all, right? So Elijah, he rebuilt this altar, had this incredible experience. Everyone is converted in an instant. Then he goes and he kills all these hundreds of prophets. And then he says to Ahab, you should go up to your house and eat and drink because I hear the sound of falling rain. And then he goes up to this mountaintop and he looks out over the ocean and he prays. And he asks his servant, do you see anything? And the servant goes and he looks over the ocean. He comes back, no, I don't see anything. And then he says, go look again. So he goes and he looks and he comes back and he says, yeah, still don't see anything. And he says, go look again. 7 times he does this. And finally the servant comes back. I see a little something, a little cloud, really tiny, but it's there far off in the distance. That's enough. So he gets up and he goes down to Ahab and he says, you better get in your chariot. You better go home because you don't want to get stuck in this rainstorm that's about to come. And as he gets down there, the sky begins to turn black. His faith is evidence. And Ahab gets in the chariot and he starts to go home. And it says that Elijah then decides, I'm going to run ahead of the chariot. And it's interesting what's going on here. Elijah decides, I'm going to run ahead of this chariot, but the Spirit of the Lord empowers him to do this thing, and so Elijah runs ahead of this chariot. Some of the scholars think, is probably not to outbeat him, it wasn't a race. It was to make sure the chariot got home safely. This is the king. This is the person that's going to make all the reformation start in the land. And so Elijah wants to make sure he gets home okay. So he runs ahead of the chariot, making sure that there's nothing with rain coming down, mud in the trail, make sure he gets okay. So Elijah runs ahead of this chariot with the Spirit of the Lord. This is 15 miles he runs, half marathon. He just goes, okay, I haven't done enough today. And so he girds up his loins and he runs ahead of this chariot all the way to Jezreel, where his palace is at. And then Elijah, it says, he sits down outside of the palace, 1 Kings chapter 19. And Elijah, he sits down outside of that palace, and he's thinking, maybe in the rain, maybe there's an arch, maybe a tree, who knows. He's out there, and he's thinking, okay, this is it. I've done it. I've done it. Everything's going to be different from here on out. So Ahab's going to go inside. He's going to tell his wife a thing or two about what just happened, that all her prophets are dead, and that he's going to make some reformation. He's going to make some change here in this nation. And Elijah's sitting out there, and he's just happy. Have you ever been in that moment where everything went right? You're exhausted, but everything went right. It was well worth all of your energy because you know what's going to happen the next day. You know that there's going to be fruit from your labor. You know that there's going to be change. This is what you've been praying for, hoping for, and you see the evidence of it. And he's sitting outside, and he's just excited. Maybe you get a phone call from a friend that says, you know what? Things are really going hard in my life right now, but would you pray with me? And you get all excited because I've been praying for this person for years. And now they called me up, and they're wanting me to pray with them. Yeah, I'll pray with you. And you get so excited because you expect a change to happen in their life. You've been searching for a job for a really long time, and finally somebody says, hey, you know what? I know about a job. I know I have a friend that owns a company, and I'm sure he'll give you a job. And just give me your resume. And you're typing up your resume, making it all, you're padding a little bit, that's, okay. And you're making sure the resume is good, and then you send it off, and as you hit send, you're like, yeah, things are going to change. This is awesome. That some night you are completely drained of energy, and you lay down on your bed and you cry out to God and you go, what do I do, God? And God speaks to you, and you're just like, yeah, my devotional life is going to be completely different from here on out. I'm going to wake up early in the morning. I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. because I normally wake up at 8, so I can spend time with God. It's going to be great. Things are going to be different. And Elijah's sitting there by that gate, and then he hears someone coming out of the palace that night, and he thinks, what could he be thinking? He's thinking, well, it might be Ahab telling me the good news. Yeah. It could be Jezebel ready to tell me off. That's all right. I could take her. But instead, he gets a messenger. And this messenger comes, and it says that Ahab, in verse 1 of chapter 19, it says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all her prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, so may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. And verse 3 says, then Elijah was afraid. Afraid? Wait, hold on. Elijah the prophet of God, the Elijah that stood before the king, that told him how he had gone against God, and that God was going to put a drought on the land, that the Elijah that went up on the top of the mountain and called fire down from heaven, the Elijah that ran ahead 15 miles in front of a chariot drawn by a horse, like this Elijah, he was afraid of this person like letting off some steam. And it says, verse 3, then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. You're too slow. Verse 4, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. This calculation for miles, it's actually 100 miles, a little over 100 miles that he ran over these 2 days. People can easily walk 70 miles in a day if you just keep walking all day long, according to some people online. 100 miles, it's doable. You're going to be tired by the end of that. 2 days walking, and so he after watching, think of his energy expenditures. So he finally gets to this broom tree, and he asks that he might die, saying, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. And he lay down and slept under a broom tree. What is with Elijah? What's going on with him? Why does he now want to die after such an incredible experience with God showing such miraculous things in his life, in his country, to his people? All of his hopes and dreams came true. And now why does he want to die? Because someone gave him a little threat. One, I think about we are a unit of mental, physical, and spiritual entities. We are part of, what happens in our mind affects our body. What happens in our body affects our spirit. What happens in our spirit affects the rest of us. And so Elijah has exhausted himself physically. Yes, in the things that God asked him to do, but what brought him here? So we have Elijah that is running ahead of the chariot because, better make sure the king's going to make it home okay. And then he hears this threat, and he jumps up and he leaves from Jezebel, and then he runs another 2 days after that. What's going on with him? He's exhausted himself, he's spent himself, he is burnt out because he's done things that God didn't ask him to do. He felt it and he moved. Every point in his journey, in his story, the Lord spoke to him and he obeyed. But here, God didn't say anything. He just gets up and he runs. There is something else interesting in this point in the story. It says that he laid down, he slept under a broom tree just after saying, "O Lord, it is enough. Take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers." There's an insight into Elijah's mind at this point. How has he been planning all along in his career? First, at the beginning, he comes to Ahab and he says, "Rain will not fall except by my word." Then later he goes to the widow, and when the widow's son dies, he lays him in the upper room and he said, "God, why did you do this to the widow with whom I lodge?" When he's up on that mountaintop, he says, "May God know that, may they know that you're the Most High God and that I am your servant." There's this self wrapped up in his ministry. There is his identity is wrapped up in his ministry. And now that things look like it's going south, he's in despair. There's nothing more that he has to hang on to. And he says, "I might as well be dead, God. Just take my life. I'm done." There is this concept of a perfect Christian. That we have this concept that Christianity does something to us, to our family, thank you very much. Then we have a perfect Christian image in our minds that we say that if we aren't this perfect Christian, then we somehow aren't connected with God, that God isn't active in our lives. That God is, because God's supposed to fix us, right? He's supposed to fix our families. We're supposed to fix how we live our lives. And when we have that disparity between us and that ideal, we go, "Oh man, I better make up for that." So I'm gonna smile on Sabbath. I'm gonna smile to the people at church. Happy Sabbath, and I'm gonna dress nice because that's what Christ does. He makes us wear a tie and a really nice dress shirt, right? And he puts a smile on our face, happy home, you know. And then our spouse, when we're fighting in the car on the way over here, and we're yelling at each other, and what's going on? And as soon as the doors open, it just changes. And when our kids, if they don't fit the norm, if they don't fit what we think a Christian should be, then boy, you better put on a face. And if you do anything to embarrass me at church, if you do anything to make me seem like I'm less than a perfect Christian, then you're going to get it on the whole ride home. All the rest of Sabbath. You're going to go for a Sabbath nap. And as we have this concept of Christianity, but that is not Christianity. Christ, when he enters the heart, when he enters the family home, when he enters that space that we let him into, it's not that he makes us perfect. It's not that he makes us all smiley. It's not that he makes us whitewashed on the outside. Instead, he makes us whole. He heals us. He leads us. We still have things that we're dealing with because he's working with us. And the difference, when you look at the two families, the ones with Christ and the ones without, they're both messed up. They both have problems. They both have fights. They both have issues that they don't want to talk about in public. But the difference is that the family with Christ is a whole lot less messed up in the way that they look. There is this, in addition to then those troubles that go between, there is also this peace, like Yeshua said, that doesn't make sense. There are these times of healing and forgiveness that do not exist in this other family. There are the ability to forgive somebody actually manifests itself, that people are being brought back to Christ over and over and over again. And so Elijah, he's there and he sees that he has these standards that he set for himself, and he sees, I know better than my fathers. My fathers, the other prophets, the other righteous people in Israel, they tried to make reformation. They tried to make people turn back to God. I thought I was ready to do it, but I failed. And now he's under this broom tree and he goes, what more do I have to do? I have nothing. I can't even be good like I wanted to. And so he says, might as well die. But, there's always a but. Verse 5, and he lay down and slept under the broom tree, and behold, an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. And he looked, just an angel. And behold, there was at his head a cake baked with hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and he drank, and then he lay down again. Okay, whatever. Verse 7, and the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, for the journey, it's too great for you. And he arose and he ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days, 40 nights to Oreb, the mount of God. There he came to a cave and lodged in it. This mountain, Mount Oreb, this is the same mountain that Moses, when he was leading the people of Israel, led them to, and he went up into this mountain and he met with God. There was an earthquake, there was thunder, there was fire, everything going crazy around him, and God let him see his back, put him in the cleft of the rock, covered him up with his hand, and let him see his back. Moses saw God's back. Not a very glorious part of any person, but just that glimpse of God was enough to make Moses' face shine to where he had to put a veil over it when he talked to the people because they were terrified of even the reflection of God on his face. That glimpse of God, when he saw God and knew that God was a merciful God, a loving God, that character, that glimpse of God's character and person was enough to lead Moses, to empower, to strengthen Moses for the rest of his ministry, the rest of those 40 years wandering around in that wilderness with that stiff-necked people. Now Elijah is being brought by the word of the Lord to this mountain, the same mountain, to meet with God, and Elijah finds a cave, goes into the back, and lays down, goes to sleep. You think, how are you going to meet with God? And it says that, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said, Elijah, what are you doing here, Elijah? And then he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left. And they seek to take my life away also. And God said to him, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And then it says, "And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountain and broke the mountain to pieces, and the rocks before the Lord. And the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after an earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in a cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave." After all those things that had accompanied God's presence before happened, then Elijah walks out to the mouth of the cave. "Fine, I'm here." And he puts his face in his coat like this. Is this how you see God? And behold, there came a voice to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel. I have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And even I only am left, and they seek to take my life away also." And the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, you'll anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, Jehu to be king over Israel, and Elisha, the son of Shaphat, to be a prophet in your place." Elijah had these standards for himself, and the ones that he saw that these were the ones that he saw that God had for him too. These standards were the things that actually kept Elijah from meeting with God, that having that time with God that he so desperately wanted, so desperately needed, to have that experience with him that would empower him to continue what he started on that mountain throughout and make a change in his nation. He had this legalistic mentality that if he couldn't make it up to here, then there's no point to working anymore. That we have to be up here before we can be expected to be loved by God. "No, God, I'm not worthy. I certainly won't take your pity. What I deserve is to be far away from you. You don't want me. I'm not like Moses. I'm not worth your attention. I'm scared of being in your presence, actually. Not because you'll smite me, because I know that in your presence I am safe. I know that you are a God of love, but I'm afraid because in your presence I have to come face to face with my own inabilities. I have to come face to face with my own weaknesses. In your presence, I will truly see how messed up I am by myself." It's not about you, God. You're good. You are good. You're a good, good Father. I know this. It's not about you. It's about me. In fact, it's always been about me. And if I come to you, then I will just fall apart. I'll have nothing left of myself to hold on to, and I just can't have that. So I'm going to stay in the back of this cave and hang on to the last bit of my dignity. I'm going to cover up my eyes when you come near, so I can't look you in your eyes. I'm going to blame the people for their stupidity, for their rebellious nature. Have you ever felt like Elijah? Have you ever felt like Elijah? Have you done what God said but not wanted to see his face? Have you ever looked at yourself and thought that God must be just completely disgusted with you? That God was completely done with you? Remember from this story that God, he's bigger than your mistakes. God is stronger than your mood swings. God is greater than that little box of compassion that you stuff him into. And he cares for you, and he wants so desperately to meet with you because he knows that that is what you need. Stop listening to your fears. Stop listening to insecurities. Stop running. You have a loving God who cares for you, He does not love you because you are successful. He does not love you because you do good things for him. He does not love you because you have overcome obstacles in your pathway. He does not love you even because of your ministry. He loves you because you are his. He loves you because that he bought you on a different hilltop after going himself into a different cave. Why don't you go out and meet him? Remember this story so that way the next time you find yourself under that broom tree or in the back of some cave, ask yourself, what am I doing here? And then go out and stand on that mountain and meet with God. May God bless you all.